Hey, welcome to my weekly live stream. I'm Kristine Weber. I love to support mature women who share yoga, who are yoga teachers and or just love yoga, and support you in your work with yoga, but also in helping you to find ways of doing yoga that are sustainable and safe and low risk. I've been working a lot on with in policy actually. With an advocacy group called the Integrative Health Policy Consortium in Washington, D.C. And one of the things that we've been working on is how yoga helps folks with chronic pain. But, my joke is always like, yeah, it depends on the yoga, because if you want to get chronic pain, yoga will help you too, so like you got to make sure that you're doing these things that are actually supporting people and not causing repetitive strain injury and compression and all that stuff that goes on in the yoga world, unfortunately. So anyway, today's post is about your knees, and I've been teaching about the knees over in the Subtle Yoga Resilience Society, which is my weekly membership. If you're interested, check out the link. And so here's what I want to tell you about your knees. Like, be nice to them. That's what I want to say. Be nice to your knees, because you do not want to have to get surgery if you don't need it, right? And there's plenty of things you can do in yoga that will require you to get surgery, whether it is straining and pulling, tearing ligaments, and sometimes tendons, typically ligaments, whether it's ripping your meniscus, which is the little bit of cartilage that lives between the tibia and the femur. Or the other big one that happens to lots of people is that they get such bad arthritis from overuse and other reasons that they end up having to get knee replacement surgery. So orthoscopic surgery is not as bad, right? People go in there and start repairing the tendon, the ligaments with just like little incisions. That's not as bad. But knee replacement surgery, ouch. You know, save your knees in yoga, because you want to wait till the surgery gets better to be able if you need a whole knee replacement surgery, it's a major operation. It's really, and those of you who've had it understand, like, painful, and it requires a lot of time to get better, and you won't have the mobility in your knee usually that most people have had, previously. So hip replacement surgery, I'd rather avoid that too, but it's not as invasive and as intense as the knee replacement surgery, which means you should be taking care of your knees in yoga practice, because you don't want to have to get surgery, right? I mean, people need it because they have car accidents, or they like are rugby players and get, nailed in their knee too much, like that. Okay, that's why people get surgery. But if you can avoid it, yoga should be helping your knees, not making them worse. So here's what you need to remember. Your knee is meant mostly to do flexion and extension. That's the functional, healthy functional purpose of your knee, is to flex and extend, right? I don't know if you can see me. Back up a little bit. Flex, extension, right? That's what your knee is mostly supposed to do. It can do a little bit of rotation, a little bit, in a healthy way, and it has to. Like, if you're playing tennis and you're moving around, like that sort of stuff, like, you need to have a little bit of rotation in your knee, but you don't want to overdo that. You need to have a little bit of side bending in the knee, and don't want to overdo that. And you need to be able to glide in and out of the knee. So the knee does flexion and extension. That's what it's supposed to do. A little bit of rotation, a little bit of side bending, a little bit of gliding. Minimize the side bending, gliding, and rotation. Maximize the flexion and extension, as long as the alignment is right and you don't have like a varus or valgus, right? So the valgus is the cowboy knees and the varus is the knock knees, So if you were born like that, that requires much more, or you've done use things like riding horses. That requires much more, therapeutic approach, obviously. But there's a couple of basic things. If you have a high arch, you want your knee to point more towards your big toe when you bend it, right? When you track it, like in Warrior Two. If you have a flat foot, You want your knee to go more like towards the second and third toe because it's going to like improve your arch. So that kind of tracking of the knee is important when you do flexion and extension. And then flexion and extension of the knee is important in terms of helping to create a little more mobility in the quads as well as the hammies, right? Quads and hamstrings we need. And a lot of women have overdeveloped quads and weak hamstrings. That's a really common uh, imbalance that we see, and you see it all the time in the yoga world. So strengthen those hamstrings. Lots of bridge pose, where your knee is just in a little bit of flexion, right? And stretching the quads, like lunges, where your knees is going to be maybe in a little bit of flexion as well, but you start working towards extension to get a little bit more of that quad stretch. Those are like really kind of general safe rules for yoga practice. When you start to load up your knee when it's in rotation, guess what pose does that? Yes, you're right, pigeon, right? You start loading up your knee, you've got to be careful with that stuff. You got to be careful with it and have, and take it with a lot of awareness. Hey, why not just lie on your back and do supine pigeon if you want to stretch your external hip rotators? Because your hips are these like huge joints that they're stronger than, and your knee is small and very, very vulnerable. So be kind to your knees. That is my number one recommendation for yoga people. When you're thinking about your knees, be kind. Try not to load them up with a bunch of different poses that are putting all your body weight into this knee that maybe doesn't need that to happen, right? Maybe needs more kind ways of strengthening and less aggressive ways of mobilizing. Hey, if you want to study with me weekly, check out the Subtle Yoga Resilience Society. I'm there every Wednesday morning. I would love you to join us. And I hope you enjoy this tip. Please leave a comment. See you next week. Mwah.